All right, so now we're going to talk all about money and banking and borrowing and saving. So, this is one of the most important topics in macroeconomics. It's obviously one of the industries, if not the major industry, that led to the financial crisis in 2007, 2008. So, what we're going to start with is just trying to understand the role of money, and then we'll talk about how banks uh, use that money in order to match people who want to borrow versus people who want to save. And so we're going to talk about why people might want to borrow money, why people might want to save money. So money is what we call the medium of exchange, which just means that we buy and sell stuff with money, right? Which is always true. Even if you're using a credit card, your bank is sending money to the store, and then you are going to pay your bank back with money from your checking account. Um, so one of the interesting things about the banking system in the United States is that banks actually are able to create money. So we think of money as either being printed, or maybe we think of the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the United States, as creating money. And they do play a very important role, but banks also play a very important role and can actually create money out of thin air just by lending. And so we'll talk about that. We're also going to think about how the banking system affects people's decisions, right? Whether they can borrow money or not borrow money. And we'll also think about limitations to the banking system and problems that it might cause to the economy. So, we're going to start off after we talk just a little bit about money with the idea of why people borrow, save, or invest. And saving and investment are sort of two sides of the same coin, but they don't always have the same risk and return. And so we're going to talk about those two things. We'll talk about the role of banks in the economy, and we'll talk about both why we need banks and why they are a really important part of the macroeconomy, and also when they can go bad. So when we use the term money in English, we mean a lot of things, right? We mean the coins and bills that we have in our pockets and our wallets and our purses. We mean wealth, right? How much money does that guy have? How much money is she worth? And that's really where we're talking about wealth. How much money does that person make, right? That's when we're talking about income. How much money does that person have? We might be talking about savings, right? And so all of these things are related to money. When we talk about money in economics, we're really talking about the medium of exchange, what we use to buy and sell goods and services. So cash and coins, and checking accounts, and then to some extent savings accounts, etc. Money itself is what we call a stock variable, right? So there are some things that we can measure over time. We call those flow variables, versus some things that we measure at one point in time, which we call a stock variable. So for an example, we have this picture of a bathtub here. The amount of water that is in the tub, right, at any given point in time is a stock variable. That's like wealth. That's like how much money is in the economy. There are a lot of different stock variables. When we're talking about accounting, think about things like assets and liabilities. Those are stock variables, things that show up on the balance sheet. We can also measure flow variables, things that happen over time. So the flow that comes in from the shower is a flow variable. We would measure how much water is coming in from the shower over time. And here you can't quite see this. Let me move this over here. Consumption is a flow variable. GDP is a flow variable. In this case, how much wealth you have is going to change depending on how much gross income you get, right, the flow, versus how much evaporates in depreciation. So depreciation is like when something gets worn out. So if like you're using a truck and that's one of your assets, but it gets worn out over time, that's depreciation. And then of course you're going to spend some money on consumption. And so if your gross income is more than depreciation and consumption, your wealth is going to go up. If it's less than depreciation and consumption, then your wealth is going to go down. And so money is not really about wealth it's really just the oil that allows the economy, the economic engine to go. Because wealth could be, made up of stocks and bonds and real estate and cars and computers and gold. All these things could make some form of wealth. And so those are going to be important things. Now, savings is how much you don't spend, right? So you get your income, you spend some, whatever's left, that's savings. When we talk about investment in economics, we're often talking about buying new, what we call capital goods, new things that are going to produce goods and services. So if UPS buys a new truck, that's investment. If Walmart builds a new store, that's investment. If the ice cream shop down the street buys a new freezer, that's investment, right? That's all going to allow them to produce more goods and services. So money is really important, but it's important to think about, the way we use it in colloquial English is not very specific. All right, we're going to stop there for this video, and in the next video we'll pick it up here and talk about how people decide whether or not they want to consume now or